They called it the event that would haunt a generation. A missile launch with no warning, no announcement, and no known origin, striking fear into hearts of a quiet Midwestern town. The sky turned a strange orange. The wind carried a tension no one could name, and families looked at the horizon, wondering if their lives would end before breakfast. This was not a drill. This was a warning, and no one knew who had pressed the button. The investigation began quietly, almost hesitantly. Federal authorities moved first, sweeping through classified communication channels, intercepting signals, tracing every anomaly from the launch site to the missile trajectory. The object itself was launched from a site no one had fully acknowledged, an abandoned military compound in rural Kansas, a place with faded fences and boarded windows, but with systems capable of launching weapons few knew remained operational. Captain Olivia Walker was among the first on the ground. She had spent her career with the Missile Defense Division, analyzing threats, tracking signals, and preparing for improbable scenarios. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the silence that accompanied the launch. Radar systems lit up, alarms blared, yet no human voice confirmed the command. The missile's movement was precise, controlled, deliberate, as if guided by someone intimately familiar with the system, someone who had walked its corridors and understood its deepest secrets. The townspeople were left in uncertainty. Chicago, Omaha, and smaller counties in the Midwest watched the skies. Families huddled in basements, their eyes fixed on faint blips on outdated radar feeds, listening to the radio for reassurance that never came. Among them were witnesses who would later be called in as critical sources. Truck drivers passing the launch site, farmers who noticed unusual night activity, and a retired communications officer who remembered seeing classified vehicles parked in the area in the weeks prior. Each piece of testimony was a puzzle, seemingly inconsequential until patterns began to emerge. Investigators followed the digital trail. Signals pinged across satellites, encrypted communications crossed multiple servers, and one name kept surfacing: Daniel Gonzalez, a former contractor who'd been quietly rehired for a temporary project at the facility. At first, it seemed like coincidence. But when cell tower pings placed him within proximity to the site hours before the launch, suspicions grew. His background was impeccable on paper, a decorated former military officer, with expertise in missile guidance systems and top-level security clearance. Yet the investigation uncovered subtle anomalies in his employment records, unexplained gaps, unreported temporary assignments, and forged clearance renewals. The town's fear escalated as the missile traveled its path. Ground-based interceptors were deployed from multiple states, but they failed to engage in time. It became clear. Whoever launched this had calculated every step, had anticipated federal responses, and had manipulated the chain of command to buy enough minutes for the missile to proceed unchallenged. The terror was deliberate, surgical, and almost theatrical in its precision. Leads emerged from the Pentagon archives, released under emergency request. Operators had noticed a series of unusual protocol overrides in the weeks leading up to the event. Minor, almost routine changes, code sequence modifications, delayed authorization timestamps, and falsified logs. Each seemingly trivial, yet together they form a path to bypass safeguards. The question became unavoidable. Who had knowledge of these loopholes, and more importantly, who had the audacity to exploit them? An anonymous tip led investigators to a small cabin in rural Missouri, near Deshew's rail line that had once served military transports. Inside, they found evidence of planning, detailed blueprints of the missile silo, modified control panels, and an intricate timetable mapped across calendars and notebooks. Among the items was a photograph showing a young man in military uniform standing before the silo. The resemblance to Gonzalez was unmistakable. Confronted with evidence, Gonzalez initially denied involvement, but forensic analysis traced fingerprints on the control systems, digital signatures on the override codes, and traces of fiber and residue from his personal belongings. He had exploited his familiarity with the system, his intimate knowledge of both protocol and human behavior, to execute a launch that would terrorize thousands while maintaining plausible deniability. The final piece of the puzzle emerged from a surveillance review. Security footage from an adjacent civilian observatory captured the moment of activation. The timestamp aligned with the missile's initial trajectory. A hand, steady and deliberate, pressed a sequence on a concealed terminal. It was Daniel Gonzalez. The act was calculated, every angle considered. His motive, investigators later concluded, was a complex blend of personal grievance and a desire to test the system's weaknesses. He believed that exposing these vulnerabilities would force federal agencies to acknowledge lapses that had long been ignored. The trial was swift, though heavily secured. Gonzalez faced charges of terrorism, illegal weapons use, and conspiracy against the United States. Expert witnesses described the technical genius behind the launch, as well as the meticulous planning that had allowed it to proceed without immediate interception. Survivors testified to the fear, the uncertainty, and the long hours spent wondering if they would see their families again. By the end of the proceedings, the jury had no doubt. The launch was deliberate, executed with knowledge, and carried out by a single man, exploiting every loophole he could find. After the conviction, investigators returned to the site. The missile had been defused before reaching populated areas, but its trail remained a stark reminder of vulnerability. The abandoned compound, once silent, now stood as a symbol of what could happen when knowledge, opportunity, and intent converge. Residents resumed their lives, but the memory lingered. Every faint radar ping, every shadow on the horizon, a reminder that one individual had almost rewritten reality. In the end, the case of the missile launch revealed more than just a technical breach. It exposed the fragility of systems designed to protect, the human element that could exploit them, and the courage of investigators who pieced together evidence from fragments of observation, testimony, and digital traces. The question that haunted everyone in the Midwest, who launched the missile, finally had an answer. Daniel Gonzalez, armed with knowledge and intent, had pressed a button. But the broader truth endured. Vigilance, accountability, and oversight are the only barriers between calm skies and catastrophic uncertainty. The town returned to quiet routines. Farmers watched their fields, and children played under the wide Midwestern sky. Yet in the silence, the echo of the missile's path remained. It served as a warning that one individual, one decision, could unsettle thousands. And it reminded the nation that even in a world fortified by technology and protocol, the human element remains both the greatest strength and the most unpredictable risk. The case closed, the criminal punished, but the story endured, a sobering lesson of how easily chaos could emerge from preparation, knowledge, and ambition. The missile had been launched, the mystery solved, and the truth laid bare for all who would look.